The rain was coming down hard that night. Not the gentle kind that makes you want to curl up with a book, but the angry, relentless type that soaks you to the bone in seconds. David Rodriguez had seen plenty of nights like this during his 7 years working the graveyard shift at Memorial Hospital. The kind of night where most people stayed home warm and dry, while he walked the empty hallways making sure everything was secure. It was a Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday. The days all blurred together when you worked from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. David didn't mind, though. The night shift paid a little extra, and besides, he liked the quiet. No crowds, no chaos. Just him, the hum of the vending machines, and the occasional nurse rushing past with a tired smile. He was making his usual rounds on the first floor when he glanced through the glass entrance doors. That's when he saw her. A woman sitting on the bench just outside, completely drenched. Her clothes were stuck to her skin, her hair plastered against her face. She was hunched over a small backpack, holding it close like it was the only thing she had left in the world. David paused. He'd been a security guard long enough to know that hospitals attracted all kinds of people at all hours. Some were waiting for news about loved ones. Others had nowhere else to go. His job was to keep the hospital safe, and that sometimes meant asking people to move along. But something about this woman made him stop and really look. She wasn't causing trouble. She wasn't asking anyone for anything. She was just sitting there in the pouring rain, staring at nothing. Most people would have found shelter by now, but she seemed frozen in place, like she'd run out of options and energy at the same time. David pushed open the door and stepped outside. The rain hit him immediately, cold and sharp. The woman looked up, and he saw her face properly for the first time. She was probably in her early 30s with red, swollen eyes that suggested she'd been crying for a while. There was something broken in her expression, a kind of defeat that David recognized all too well. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, raising his voice over the sound of the rain. She nodded, but it was the kind of nod that meant the exact opposite. "I'm fine," she said quietly. "I'll move if I'm not supposed to be here." "It's not about that," David said, squatting down to her level so she didn't have to look up at him. "You're soaking wet. Have you been out here long?" The woman's lip trembled. "A couple hours, maybe. I don't know. I lost track of time. What's going on? Can I help you with something?" That's when she broke, not with loud sobs, but with the quiet kind of crying that comes from exhaustion and desperation. She told him her name was Jennifer, and she'd taken a bus from 3 states away to get here. Her mother was inside the hospital, dying from cancer. They hadn't spoken in years because of mistakes Jennifer had made, terrible choices that had torn their family apart. But when she got the call that her mother didn't have much time left, she knew she had to come. The trip had taken everything she'd saved up. She'd arrived at the bus station around 7 that evening, planning to take a taxi straight to the hospital. But while she was in the restroom, someone stole her bag. Not the backpack she was holding now, but another one with her wallet, her phone, and what little cash she had left. She'd filed a report with the police, but they told her there wasn't much they could do. These things happened at bus stations. By the time she made it to the hospital on foot, it was past 10. Visiting hours had ended at 8. The staff at the front desk had been polite but firm. No visitors after hours except in emergency situations for immediate family members already cleared by the patient. Jennifer tried to explain her situation, but without ID, without proof of who she was, they couldn't let her in. They suggested she come back in the morning when visiting hours started again at 8. But Jennifer had nowhere to go. No money for a hotel, no phone to call anyone, no friends in this city. So she sat outside in the rain waiting for morning to come. David listened to all of this without interrupting. When she finished, he sat down on the wet bench next to her, not caring that his uniform was getting soaked. He thought about his younger brother, Tommy, who'd struggled with his own demons years ago. Tommy had made mistakes too, pushed family away, burned bridges. David had tried to help, but he hadn't tried hard enough. When Tommy died, David carried that weight with him every single day. Looking at Jennifer now, he saw someone who was trying. Really trying. She'd traveled hundreds of miles with barely any money just for a chance to say goodbye to her mother. That took courage. That took heart. And here she was, at the lowest point imaginable, and nobody had shown her even a sliver of kindness. "Listen," David said. "I can't get you inside to see your mom tonight. Those rules exist for good reasons, and I don't have the authority to break them. But I can't leave you sitting out here in the rain either. That's not happening on my watch. Jennifer looked at him confused. What do you mean? I mean, we're going to figure this out together, David said, standing up. First thing, let's get you inside somewhere dry. There's a family waiting room that's usually empty at night. You can warm up there. Then we're going to make some calls and see what we can do about your situation. I don't have money to pay you, Jennifer said quickly. I can't afford— Did I ask for money? David interrupted gently. Come on, let's get out of this rain. He led her inside through the main entrance, nodding at Rita, the night receptionist, who gave him a questioning look but didn't say anything. David had worked there long enough that people trusted his judgment. He took Jennifer to the small waiting room on the second floor, the one near the chapel that families used during long nights of waiting for news. Stay here, he said. I'm going to grab you some coffee and something to eat. The cafeteria's closed, but the vending machines still work. You like coffee? Jennifer nodded, tears forming in her eyes again. Why are you helping me? David thought about Tommy, about all the times his brother had needed help and people had looked the other way, about all the chances Tommy never got because everyone had written him off as a lost cause. Because somebody should, David said simply, I'll be right back. As he walked down the hallway toward the vending machines, David pulled out his phone and texted his wife. He had a feeling this was going to be a long night, and morning shift was still 5 hours away. But for the first time in months, he felt like he was doing something that really mattered, something that his brother would have been proud of. He didn't know it then, but that simple decision to help a stranger in the rain was about to change his life in ways he never could have imagined. David returned to the waiting room, carrying 2 cups of coffee and whatever snacks he could find in the vending machine. Cheese crackers, a granola bar, and a package of cookies. Not exactly a 5-star meal, but it was better than nothing. Jennifer was sitting in the same spot where he'd left her, still clutching her backpack, looking small and lost in the empty room. Here, he said, setting everything down on the small table next to her. It's not much, but it'll warm you up. Jennifer wrapped her hands around the coffee cup like it was the most precious thing in the world. Thank you, she whispered. You really didn't have to do this. Yeah, I did, David said, pulling up a chair across from her. Now let's figure out your situation. You said someone stole your bag at the bus station. Did you file a police report? She nodded. Right after it happened. The officer was nice enough, but he said these things are hard to solve. He gave me a case number and said I should contact my bank to cancel my cards, but I can't do that without a phone. David thought for a moment. Okay, we can use the hospital phone to make some calls. First, let's try to reach your bank. What about identification? Was your driver's license in the stolen bag? Everything was in there, Jennifer said, her voice breaking. My license, my debit card, even the letter from the hospital about my mom. I kept the letter because I wanted to show her that I came as soon as I found out. I wanted her to know I cared. David saw tears running down her face again. This woman had been through hell tonight, and here she was worrying about proving to her dying mother that she loved her. It broke his heart. Listen to me, he said firmly but kindly. We're going to make this work. I need to finish my rounds, but I'm going to talk to my supervisor about your situation. His name is Phil, and he's been here even longer than me. If anyone can help us bend the rules a little, it's him. In the meantime, you eat something and try to rest. You look exhausted. Jennifer grabbed his hand suddenly. I don't know how to thank you. I've been clean for 1.5 years, and this whole night I kept thinking that the old me would have just given up, would have found the easiest way out. But I promised myself I'd be better. I'd do better. And then you showed up. David felt a lump in his throat. She'd said the words so casually, but he understood exactly what she meant. His brother Tommy had struggled with the same demons. The difference was Tommy never made it to 1.5 years. He never got that second chance. You're doing great, David said quietly. Being here trying to see your mom, that takes real strength. Now get some rest. I'll be back in an hour. He finished his rounds faster than usual, his mind working the whole time. When he reached the security office, Phil was there, doing paperwork and drinking his 3rd cup of coffee of the night. Phil was in his 60s, a former Marine with a gruff exterior but a soft heart. Over the years, David had learned that Phil valued honesty above everything else. Phil, I need your help with something, David said, closing the door behind him. This sounds serious, Phil said, looking up from his paperwork. What's going on? David explained everything. The woman outside in the rain, the stolen bag, the dying mother she hadn't seen in years. He laid it all out, not sugarcoating anything. When he finished, Phil leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. "You know the rules about after-hours visitors," Phil finally said. "They're in place for good reasons. I know. And you know that if we make an exception for one person, it opens the door for everyone to expect special treatment. I know that too." Phil sighed and rubbed his face. "But you also know that sometimes rules need a little flexibility when we're dealing with human beings in crisis." "What's the mother's room number?" David felt relief wash over him. "I don't know yet. The woman's name is Jennifer, and her mother's last name is Patterson. She's in the cancer ward." "Give me 20 minutes, Phil said, turning to his computer. "I'll make some calls. See what I can find out." While Phil worked his magic with the hospital's night supervisor and the nursing staff, David went back to check on Jennifer. She'd managed to eat the crackers and was holding the cup of coffee, staring at the wall. She looked a little warmer but still shell-shocked. "Any luck?" she asked when she saw him. "Working on it," David said. "My supervisor's making some calls now. He's a good guy. If there's any way to get you in to see your mom tonight, he'll find it." "I still can't believe you're doing this for me," Jennifer said. "You don't even know me." David sat down again. "Can I tell you something? I had a younger brother. His name was Tommy. He struggled with a lot of the same things you mentioned. Addiction, pushing family away, feeling like he'd messed everything up beyond repair. I tried to help him, but I was young and stupid, and I didn't really understand what he was going through. I thought tough love was the answer. I thought if I just stayed firm enough, he'd figure it out." "What happened?" Jennifer asked softly. "He died 8 years ago. Overdose, he was 26. David's voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. "And every day since then I've wondered what would have happened if I'd been kinder. If I'd tried harder to understand instead of judge. If I'd shown up for him the way he needed me to show up." Jennifer was crying now too. "I'm so sorry." "Me too," David said. "But here's the thing. When I saw you sitting out there tonight soaking wet and alone, I saw someone who was trying. Really trying. And I thought about all the times Tommy tried and nobody gave him a chance. Nobody showed him that they believed he could do better. So maybe I can't help my brother anymore, but I can help you. And maybe that's worth something." They sat in silence for a moment, two strangers connected by grief and second chances. Then Phil appeared in the doorway. "David, can I see you for a minute?" David stepped into the hallway and Phil spoke quietly. "Okay, here's what I found out. Jennifer's mother, Patricia Patterson, is in room 412. She's in pretty bad shape. The nurses say she keeps asking for her daughter. The night shift supervisor agreed to let Jennifer visit, but only because it's a compassionate situation and the patient has been asking for family. She can stay for an hour, but then she'll need to leave until regular visiting hours." "That's perfect," David said. "Thank you, Phil, really." "Don't thank me yet," Phil said. "What happens after that hour? She still has no money, no place to stay, no phone. We can't let her sleep in the waiting room indefinitely." David had already been thinking about that. "I'll call my wife. Maybe we can help her get set up at a shelter for the night, somewhere safe. Then tomorrow we can help her figure out the rest. One step at a time," Phil nodded slowly. "You've got a good heart, Rodriguez. Sometimes too good. But all right, let's do this. Bring her up to the 4th floor. I'll meet you there and explain the situation to the nurse on duty." David went back to the waiting room, and when Jennifer saw his face, she knew immediately that something had changed. She stood up, her hand shaking. "We can get you in to see your mom," David said. "Right now. You'll have an hour with her." Jennifer's legs almost gave out. She grabbed the back of the chair to steady herself. "Are you serious? How did you manage that?" "Let's just say my supervisor understands that sometimes people need a break," David said with a small smile. "Come on, let's go see your mom." As they walked through the quiet hospital corridors toward the elevator, Jennifer kept looking at David like she couldn't quite believe he was real, and David kept thinking about Tommy, hoping that wherever his brother was, he knew that someone was finally doing the right thing. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt like it took forever. Jennifer stood next to David, wiping her eyes and trying to compose herself. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. After years of being apart, after traveling hundreds of miles with nothing but hope, she was finally going to see her mother again. But what if her mother didn't want to see her? What if all those years of mistakes had destroyed whatever love had once been there? "She's going to be happy you're here," David said, as if reading her mind. "Trust me on that." The elevator doors opened, and Phil was waiting for them with a nurse named Carol. She was an older woman with kind eyes and the tired but patient expression of someone who'd worked too many double shifts to. "Count, you must be Jennifer," Carol said warmly. "Your mother has been asking about you for days now. We kept telling her you were on your way and she just kept saying she had to hold on until you got here. She's a fighter, that one." Jennifer's voice came out as barely a whisper. "How is she?" Carol's expression softened. "She's weak, honey. The cancer has spread, and we're keeping her comfortable now. But she's awake and she's been waiting for you. That's what matters." They walked down the hallway, past rooms where other families were dealing with their own struggles and heartbreaks. David stayed a few steps behind, giving Jennifer space but wanting to be there in case she needed support. When they reached room 412, Carol pushed the door open gently. "Patricia, sweetheart, there's someone here to see you," Carol said softly. The room was dimly lit, just a small lamp in the corner casting a warm glow. In the bed lay a woman who looked much older than she probably was. Cancer had taken its toll, leaving her frail and thin, her skin pale against the white sheets. But when she saw Jennifer standing in the doorway, her eyes lit up in a way that made her look 20 years younger. "Jenny?" Her voice was weak but filled with disbelief and joy. "Is that really you, baby girl?" Jennifer broke down completely. She rushed to her mother's bedside and fell to her knees, taking her mother's hand in both of hers. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. For all those years, for all the pain I caused you. I should have come sooner. I should have called. I should have—" "Hush now," Patricia said, using what little strength she had to squeeze her daughter's hand. "You're here now. That's all that matters. You're here and I can see you one more time. I prayed for this. I prayed so hard." David felt his throat tighten. He stepped back, giving them privacy, but through the partially open door he could hear their conversation. Carol stood next to him, dabbing at her own eyes with a tissue. "7 years of this job and it never gets easier," Carol whispered. "But moments like this, they remind me why we do it." Inside the room, Jennifer was telling her mother everything. About getting clean, about the program that helped her turn her life around, about the job she'd been holding down for 8 months now. She talked about the therapy sessions, the support groups, the daily struggle to stay on the right path, and her mother listened, stroking Jennifer's hair like she used to do when Jennifer was a little girl. "I'm so proud of you," Patricia said, her voice breaking. "I always knew you had it in you to fight back. I never gave up on you, not for one single day. Even when everyone else said I should let you go, I couldn't. You're my baby. You'll always be my baby. I wasted so much time," Jennifer sobbed. "All those years we could have spent together, and I threw them away because I was too ashamed to face you. I thought you'd hate me." "Hate you?" Patricia managed a small laugh that turned into a cough. "Sweetheart, I could never hate you. I was hurt, yes. I was scared for you, but hate? Never. A mother's love doesn't work like that. It doesn't have an off switch." They talked for the full hour, making up for lost time as best they could. Jennifer told her mother about the apartment she was renting, about her neighbor's cat that always tried to sneak into her place, about the cooking class she'd started taking on weekends. Patricia shared memories from Jennifer's childhood, reminding her of the time she'd tried to give the family dog a haircut, or when she'd sold lemonade to save up for a bicycle. David checked on them a few times, always staying quiet and respectful. At one point, Patricia noticed him and gestured for him to come in. "Are you the young man who helped my daughter tonight?" she asked. David stepped into the room. "Yes, ma'am. I'm David, one of the security guards here." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Thank you for being kind to her when she needed it most. Thank you for giving an old woman the greatest gift she could ask for." "Anyone would have done the same," David said, feeling uncomfortable with the praise. "No," Patricia said firmly, with surprising strength in her voice. "Not everyone would have. Most people would have looked the other way. But you didn't. You saw someone who needed help and you helped. That's rare these days. That's special." When the hour was up, Carol came to let them know that Jennifer would need to leave until morning visiting hours. The goodbye was heartbreaking. Jennifer held her mother close, both of them crying, neither wanting to let go. "I'll be back first thing in the morning," Jennifer promised. 8 o'clock sharp. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here in town for as long as you need me." "I love you so much," Patricia whispered. "Thank you for coming home." "I love you too, Mom, more than anything." David helped Jennifer out of the room, supporting her as her legs threatened to give out. The emotional weight of the reunion had drained whatever energy she had left. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and just breathed, trying to process everything that had just happened. "Thank you," she said to David, her voice raw. "If you hadn't helped me, I would have missed this. I would have been sitting outside in the rain while my mom was up here asking for me. You gave me something I can never repay." "You don't need to repay anything," David said. "But we do need to figure out where you're going to stay tonight. My shift ends in a few hours, and I'd like to make sure you're somewhere safe before I leave." Jennifer looked panicked. "I don't know what to do. I don't know anyone here, and without money or a phone, I can't even call the few friends I have back home." David pulled out his phone. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to call my wife Linda. She volunteers at a women's shelter downtown. They might have a bed available for tonight, and they can help you with some basics. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps, getting you a temporary ID, contacting your bank, whatever you need." "Why are you doing all this?" Jennifer asked again, still unable to understand this stranger's kindness. David thought about his answer for a moment. "Because I've learned that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change someone's entire life. My brother never got that chance when he needed it most. But maybe, just maybe, if I help you, it balances things out a little. It won't bring Tommy back, but it honors his memory. Does that make sense?" Jennifer nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. "It makes perfect sense." David made the call to Linda, who immediately said she'd make some calls to the shelter. While they waited, David bought Jennifer another coffee and sat with her in the waiting room. She showed him a photo from her backpack, one of the few things that hadn't been stolen. It was an old picture of her and her mother at a fair, both of them smiling, cotton candy in their hands. "I brought this to show her," Jennifer said, "to remind her of the good times before I messed everything up." "You didn't mess everything up," David said gently. "You stumbled, you fell, but you got back up. That's what counts. And your mom knows that. She's proud of you." I could see it in her eyes. 30 minutes later, Linda called back. The shelter had a bed available, and she'd personally drive over to pick up Jennifer and get her settled in. Everything was going to be okay, at least for tonight. As they waited for Linda to arrive, David realized something. He'd come to work tonight thinking it would be just another ordinary shift. Instead, he'd been part of something extraordinary. He'd helped a daughter reunite with her dying mother. He'd shown someone that kindness still existed in the world, and in doing so, he'd honored his brother's memory in the most meaningful way possible. Sometimes, he thought, the most important thing you can do is simply show up for someone when they need it most. 3 months had passed since that rainy night at the hospital. David had gone back to his regular routine, walking the quiet halls during the graveyard shift, checking doors, making sure everything was secure. Life had returned to normal, or so he thought. He'd think about Jennifer sometimes, wondering how she was doing, hoping that things had worked out for her. But he never expected to hear from her again. That wasn't why he'd helped her. Then one Tuesday morning, as his shift was ending, Phil called him into the office with an odd expression on his face. Half amused, half bewildered. "You need to see something," Phil said, turning his computer monitor toward David. "We've been getting calls all morning. Emails, too. The hospital director wants to talk to you." David felt his stomach drop. Had he done something wrong? Had someone filed a complaint? What's going on? Phil clicked on a link, and a news article filled the screen. The headline read, "The security guard who restored my faith in humanity." Below it was a photo that David recognized immediately. It was the hospital's front entrance, the same bench where Jennifer had been sitting that night. "What is this?" David asked, leaning closer to read. "Apparently that woman you helped, Jennifer Patterson. She wrote an article about what you did for her. It got picked up by some national news website yesterday, and now it's everywhere. It's gone viral, David. Millions of people have read it." David felt dizzy. He started reading the article, and with each paragraph he felt more and more exposed. Jennifer had written about everything: the rain, the stolen bag, how David had bought her coffee and helped her file police reports, how he'd gotten her in to see her mother, how he'd arranged for shelter. She'd written about his brother Tommy, about the kindness David had shown when she had absolutely nothing. But more than that, she'd written about what it meant to her. How that one night had reminded her that people could still be good. How David's actions had reinforced her commitment to stay clean and build a better life. How seeing someone treat her with dignity and respect when she was at her lowest had changed something fundamental in how she saw herself in the world. "I don't understand," David said quietly. "I just did what anyone should do." "That's exactly the point she's making," Phil said. "She's saying that what you think anyone should do, most people don't actually do. And that's why your story matters." Over the next few days, David's life turned upside down. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. News outlets wanted interviews. The hospital was flooded with emails and letters praising David's actions. People he'd never met were stopping him in the hallways, shaking his hand, taking photos with him. The hospital director called him in for a meeting, and David was sure he was going to get reprimanded for bending the rules that night. Instead, Director Helen Montgomery offered him a promotion. Head of security, with a significant pay raise and the authority to train other security staff in what she called compassionate security practices. "What you did that night," Helen said, "that's the kind of care and humanity we want to be known for at Memorial Hospital. We don't just treat patients here, we treat people. And you embodied that perfectly. I want you to help us create a culture where every member of our security team understands that their job isn't just about following rules. It's about recognizing when those rules need flexibility to serve the greater good." David accepted, though he still felt uncomfortable with all the attention. He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy who'd helped someone who needed help. But as the days went on, he started to understand what Jennifer's article had really done. It wasn't just about him. It was about reminding people that small acts of kindness could have enormous impacts. Letters started arriving at the hospital addressed to David, hundreds of them. People sharing their own stories of times when a stranger had helped them, or times when they'd helped someone else. Teachers wrote about students they'd gone the extra mile for. Nurses talked about patients they'd comforted. One letter came from a firefighter who'd once given his coat to a homeless man on a freezing night, only to find out years later that the man had gotten back on his feet and now ran a successful business. But the letter that hit David the hardest came from a woman named Beth. She wrote that she'd been sitting in her car in a parking garage 6 months ago, planning to end her life. She'd felt completely alone, convinced that nobody in the world cared whether she lived or died. Then a security guard had knocked on her window, asked if she was okay, and spent 2 hours just talking to her. That guard had probably forgotten about the encounter, but Beth never did. She'd gotten help that night, started therapy, and now she was writing to say that she was glad she was still alive. "Your story reminded me of that security guard," Beth wrote. "It reminded me that there are people in this world who see other people's pain and actually do something about it. Thank you for being one of those people." David sat in his car after his shift that night and cried. He'd been carrying guilt about Tommy for so long, feeling like he'd failed his brother. But maybe, just maybe, helping Jennifer had been exactly what he needed to do. Not to erase the past, but to honor it. To make sure that Tommy's struggles meant something. Jennifer called him one afternoon, apologizing profusely for the chaos the article had caused. "I never thought it would blow up like this," she said. "I just wanted to write something to thank you, to tell people that good things still happen." "It's okay," David assured her. "I'm still getting used to it, but it's okay. How are you doing? How's everything been?" Jennifer's voice brightened. "Really good, actually. I've been staying in town to be near my mom. She passed away 3 weeks after that night, David. Peacefully, with me holding her hand. I got to spend those weeks with her, and we healed so much. We said everything we needed to say. I'll never be able to thank you enough for making that possible." "I'm so sorry for your loss," David said softly. "Don't be. It was a gift. Those weeks with her were a gift. And because of that experience, because of seeing how you helped me, I decided to go back to school. I'm studying to become a social worker now. I want to help people who are struggling with addiction, who are trying to rebuild their lives. I want to be for other people what you were for me that night." David felt a wave of emotion wash over him. This was bigger than he'd ever imagined. One night, one decision to help, and now Jennifer was dedicating her life to helping others. The ripple effect was real. "That's incredible, Jennifer. Really incredible. I tell all my clients about you," she continued. "About the security guard who saw me as a person, not as a problem. Who treated me with dignity when I had nothing. It gives them hope. It shows them that they're worth helping, worth saving. Your story is saving lives, David. You need to know that." After they hung up, David sat quietly for a long time. He thought about Tommy, about all the what-ifs and should-haves that had haunted him for years. He couldn't change the past. He couldn't bring his brother back. But maybe he could make sure that other people didn't fall through the cracks the way Tommy had. That evening, David started his first training session with the security team. 12 guards sat in the conference room, looking at him expectantly. He'd prepared some notes about protocols and procedures, but when he stood up to speak, he put the notes aside. "I want to tell you about my brother," he began. His name was Tommy, and he died 8 years ago. He told them the whole story. Tommy's struggles, his own failures, the guilt he'd carried, and then he told them about Jennifer, about that rainy night, about the choice he'd made to help instead of looking away. "We're not just security guards," David said. "We're often the first people that someone in crisis encounters. We have the power to either make someone's worst day a little bit better, or to make it even worse. And I know which kind of guard I want to be. The question is, which kind do you want to be?" The room was silent for a moment. Then one of the younger guards, a guy named Kevin, raised his hand. "I want to be the kind who helps. That's why I took this job. Not just to check badges and lock doors, to actually make a difference." Around the room, heads nodded in agreement, and David knew that something was changing. Not just in his own life, but in the way these people would approach their work from now on. Jennifer's article hadn't just made him famous. It had started a conversation about kindness, about seeing people instead of problems, about using whatever power you have to make the world a little bit better. As David drove home that night, he finally felt something he hadn't felt in 8 years. Peace. Tommy would never know about any of this, but somehow David felt like his brother would have been proud. 5 years had passed since that rainy night. David still worked at Memorial Hospital, though his role had changed dramatically. As head of security, he no longer walked the quiet hallways alone during the graveyard shift. Now he spent his days training new guards, developing programs, and working with hospital administration to create what they called compassionate security protocols. But the biggest change wasn't in his job title or his paycheck. It was in how he saw the world and how the world saw him. The attention from Jennifer's article had eventually faded, as these things always do. News cycles moved on to other stories, other viral moments, but the impact of that night continued to grow in ways David never could have imagined. The hospital had created something called the Rodriguez Compassion Fund, named after David despite his protests. The fund helped patients and families who found themselves in crisis situations, providing emergency assistance for things like temporary housing, food, transportation, or other immediate needs. In 5 years, it had helped over 300 families. Every time David saw the fund's name on a plaque in the hospital lobby, he felt uncomfortable. He still didn't see himself as anyone special, but others did. The security team he led had become something of a model program. Other hospitals sent their staff to Memorial to learn from David's training methods. He taught them that security wasn't just about protecting property and enforcing rules. It was about creating an environment where people felt safe, seen and valued. One of his guards, Kevin, had recently stopped a suicide attempt by simply noticing that a young man had been sitting in the parking garage for hours and asking if he needed help. Another guard, Rachel, had started keeping granola bars and water bottles in her patrol car to give to people who seemed to need them. These small acts of awareness and kindness had become part of the culture David had built. Jennifer had kept in touch over the years. She'd finished her social work degree and was now running her own program for people in addiction recovery. She called it Second Chance Support, and it had become one of the most successful programs in the state. She always said it started with the second chance David had given her that night. "I talk about you in every workshop I run," she'd told him during their last phone call. "Not to embarrass you, but because people need to hear that story. They need to know that one person's kindness can change the trajectory of someone's entire life." David had started speaking at community events, though he still got nervous every time. Schools invited him to talk to students about empathy and service. Community centers asked him to share his story at fundraisers. He always felt awkward being in the spotlight, but he went because he'd learned something important. His story wasn't really about him. It was about the power of human connection. At one high school assembly, a teenage girl had approached him afterward. She was crying, clutching a crumpled tissue in her hand. "My mom struggles with addiction," she'd said quietly. "Everyone at school treats her like she's trash when they find out." Like she's not even a person. But your story helped me remember that she's still my mom. She's still trying. Thank you for reminding me of that. Those moments made all the uncomfortable attention worth it. David kept a folder in his desk of letters and emails from people who'd been touched by the story. There were hundreds of them now. People sharing how they'd helped a stranger because of what they'd read. Others talking about times they'd been helped and finally understood how much it had meant. One letter stood out among all the others. It had arrived 2 years after Jennifer's article had gone viral, forwarded to the hospital from some news website. The return address showed it was from Oregon, and the handwriting was shaky but careful. "Dear David," it began. "You don't know me, but I read about what you did for that woman at the hospital. I'm a veteran, been homeless for 3 years now. Lost everything after I came back from deployment. PTSD, depression, the whole mess. I was ready to give up. Had my plan all figured out, but then someone shared your story in a support group I attend. Something about it stuck with me. The way you saw that woman as a person worth helping, not as a problem to get rid of. It made me wonder if maybe I was worth helping too. Long story short, I checked myself into a program, got some real help for the first time. I've been clean for 18 months now. Got a job at a warehouse, and I'm renting a room in a house with 3 other guys who are also getting back on their feet. I don't know if I would have made that choice if I hadn't heard your story, so I guess what I'm saying is thank you. You saved a life you didn't even know existed. I thought you should know that." The letter was signed by someone named Robert Chen. David had read it dozens of times, always with tears in his eyes. He'd helped a Jennifer one rainy night, and somehow that act had rippled out to touch the life of a veteran in Oregon he'd never met. It was overwhelming to think about. He'd written back to Robert, and they'd exchanged a few letters over the years. Robert was doing well, had been promoted at his job, and was now volunteering at a homeless shelter, helping other veterans find their way back. Another ripple in the pond. David had also started a tradition at the hospital. Once a month, he gathered his security team for what he called Story Circle. They'd sit together and share moments when they'd made a difference in someone's day. Not for praise or recognition, but to remind themselves why they did this work. To remember that every interaction mattered. During one Story Circle, a young guard named Tyler shared that he'd helped an elderly man who'd gotten confused and wandered away from his room. Instead of just escorting him back, Tyler had sat with him for 20 minutes, listening to stories about the man's late wife. The man's daughter had later written to thank Tyler, saying her father hadn't smiled like that in months. These were the moments that mattered. Not the viral article or the media attention, but these quiet, everyday acts of human kindness that happened because people chose to see each other as people. On the 5-year anniversary of the night he'd met Jennifer, David found himself back on the night shift by choice. He'd volunteered to cover for a guard who needed the night off for his daughter's birthday. As he walked through the familiar hallways at 2 in the morning, he thought about how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. The hospital was quiet, just like it used to be. His footsteps echoed in the empty corridors. But now, when he looked out the front entrance windows, he didn't just see the bench where Jennifer had sat. He saw all the people who'd been helped since then. All the lives that had been touched by that one decision to care. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jennifer. "Hey David, just wanted to say thank you again. I know it's been 5 years, but I think about that night all the time. I'm sitting with a new client right now who reminds me so much of who I used to be. Scared, alone, convinced nobody cares. And I get to be for her what you were for me." The ripple keeps going. "Hope you're well, friend." David smiled and typed back. "That's what it's all about. Keep changing lives. Proud of you." As he continued his rounds, David passed by the Rodriguez Compassion Fund plaque. He still didn't like seeing his name up there, but he understood now why it mattered. Not because he was special, but because the story needed to be told. People needed to be reminded that kindness wasn't weakness, that compassion wasn't naive, and that one person really could make a difference. His brother Tommy had been gone for 13 years now. David had spent so many years drowning in guilt, wishing he could go back and do things differently. He'd never get that chance. But what he'd learned was that healing didn't come from changing the past. It came from honoring it. Every person he helped, every life he touched, every guard he trained to see people with compassion, that was his way of keeping Tommy's memory alive. The legend that had grown around that rainy night wasn't really about David Rodriguez, the security guard. It was about what happens when one person decides to show up for another. It was about the courage it takes to care when it would be easier not to. It was about recognizing that we're all one bad day, one piece of bad luck, one tragedy away from being the person sitting on a bench in the rain. David completed his rounds and sat down in the security office to finish his paperwork. On his desk was a new letter that had arrived that afternoon. He opened it carefully. Inside was a short note from a teacher in Tennessee who'd used Jennifer's article in her classroom to teach her students about empathy. Attached was a stack of essays her students had written about times they'd helped someone or been helped by someone. David started reading through them, his heart full. A 14-year-old had helped a new student who didn't speak English find her classes. A 16-year-old had bought lunch for a classmate who couldn't afford it. A 15-year-old had sat with someone who was eating alone in the cafeteria. These kids got it. They understood that legendary acts didn't require capes or superpowers. They required simply seeing another person's humanity and responding to it with kindness. As the sun began to rise and David's shift came to an end, he thought about the day ahead. He had a training session with new guards at 9, a meeting with hospital administration at noon, and a speaking engagement at a community center in the evening. His life was busier than it had ever been, but it was filled with purpose. He locked up the security office and walked toward the exit. The morning light was streaming through the windows and the hospital was starting to come alive with the day shift. As he pushed through the front doors, he paused at the bench where it had all started. It was just a bench, but it represented something bigger now. It represented the truth that David had learned and would spend the rest of his life trying to share. We all have the power to be someone's legend. Not through grand gestures or heroic acts, but through the simple, profound choice to help another human being when they need it most. One act of kindness, one rainy night, one decision to care. That's all it took to change everything.